Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei and I'm so excited to paint with you today. And I'm also excited to share with you a new product that I just got in the mail. So I just got this Core mini palette. It was an impulse buy, I'm not gonna lie. I just ordered a whole bunch of sheets of watercolor paper, and while I was checking out, this came up as like a suggested item. I said, you know what, I'm gonna grab it and I'm gonna share it with my viewers and see what they think. So for those of you who've been following for a long time, you will know that I use Core watercolors. That's my preferred watercolors right now. I'm not sponsored by Core. I don't know anybody at Core or Golden. Golden is the parent company and Core is the paint company. They are made in my home state of New York, which is really just a fun little bonus for me. I hope to visit their factory. They do tours. But no, this is my preferred brand. I've used Daniel Smith, I've used Winsor & Newton, I've used Sennelier, I've used other off-name brand paints before. So this is just what I happen to prefer right now. If Golden and Core would like to sponsor me, that would be lovely and welcomed because I'm already on board. I've drunk the Kool-Aid. So anyway, I normally have, I buy my Core paints in tubes. They usually come in a tin like this, and or as individual tubes, like they'll come in a tin, a bunch of them. But these are the tube paints, and then I put those tube paints, generally, I don't work with them wet, but I put them in my metal enameled palette. This is not a Core palette. This was bought separately, and I put them in here and I dry them in here and use them and just re-wet them from here. Okay, so that's my usual MO. But then I saw this. So this is a Core mini palette. This one has 12 colors in it. They have a couple of other versions that are like the Intense palette and the Naturals palette. I don't know if those are exactly right, but they have some that have just 6 paints in them that are focused on a theme, and then they have 6 blank pans or half pans in there that you can fill with your own preference of colors. So those are cute too, and could be useful to folks who maybe already have some Core paints in tubes, would like to get one of these and just want like the 6 colors. You can look at all the colors that they offer. So this one comes in, look at this little tin, so cute. So here's what I normally get. 6 tubes would come in this, and this one is 12 little half pans, which I'm so excited to open up. The colors that are in here, okay, we have a bismuth, and I don't know how to say this other, vanadate, I'm not sure, yellow, but it's a bismuth yellow, nickel azo yellow, transparent Pyrrol orange, Pyrrol red medium, Quinacridone magenta, Dioxazine purple, Ultramarine blue, Phthalo blue green shade, sap green, transparent brown oxide, burnt umber natural, and then Payne's gray. Love that they include Payne's gray in here. So this set of colors, this is great because we have 2 versions of all of our primaries. So our primaries are red, blue, and yellow. So we have a warm and a cool shade of yellow. We have a warm red and a cool shade in the magenta for our reds. We have a warm ultramarine and a cool phthalo blue-green shade. And then they've included 3 secondary colors, or these would be like convenience colors. You could make similar colors with your primaries, but they've included an orange, the transparent Pyrrol orange, the Dioxazine purple, and a sap green, which is my favorite, as well as a handful of natural colors or neutrals, the brown oxide, the burnt umber, and a Payne's gray. So this is a great little set that packs a big punch for mixing for sure. I would definitely recommend that. Some of the other mini sets are, the 6 colors are very specific, so they wouldn't give you as much range as like this one. So just check that out. So the difference with this is this one is hinged, so it can serve as a nice little travel palette. They send you their little booklet with their full range of colors that they offer. Set that aside. A nice little swatch card, excellent. And then also just a protective sheet, we can get rid of that. So what I'd like to do is swatch out these colors. So you see how they're already pre-dried, they're in pans, they're little like cake pans, they're hard. Swatch these out and then compare some of the colors between this and what I have from tube paint. See if there's any difference. Hopefully there's not. Sometimes folks feel like tube paints, even when they're dried, can just be a little bit more vibrant or a little bit more intense, but maybe not. So let's swatch these out. I'm going to start this way and go across. And then inside here, this is actually like silicone. It said something about like non-staining silicone. 3 non-staining silicone wells in here, and then you can also use the top to mix colors in. This is enameled metal. All right, so let's get going. I'm just using my Princeton Velvet Touch brush here. This is a little size 6. So we're just gonna wet this, get it nice and wet. And you could spray this with a spray bottle, but let's put down our swatch for A. Wow, that's really nice and vibrant. And I did not have to do a lot of work. What you will find when you use cake pans like this, and they are maybe an off-brand or a no-name brand, a student grade paint versus an artist grade paint, they will be chalkier, they will have less pigment and more binder in them, so you'll have to do a lot more work, one, to activate them. So this is the Nickel Azo yellow. So very, very warm, kind of brownish yellow. This would not be my first choice for a warm yellow. I have that in my palette, but I gravitate more towards the Diarylide yellow, or like I would pick like a cadmium yellow deep from this line versus the nickel, but the nickel's okay. It'll get the job done. I just need a paper towel. So again, had to do very little work to wet and activate that, so I'm really happy with these so far. Sometimes with pans, you have to like really let them sit for a few minutes with water on them to get them activated. And the color is super intense. So far, so good, especially with the yellows. All right, what is next here? I don't know. This is a very dark color. Sometimes the darker pans, they're harder to see. Oh, this is the purple. So this is the Dioxazine purple, but when Dioxazine purple is super intense, so I did very little to get that color off of there, and look how dark and intense it is. I'm gonna add water to it. So that you can actually see the purple color. It doesn't just look black. You can start to see it a little bit. I'm going to add even more. And actually pull some color off. So these are highly pigmented. Core, you're winning my heart once again. All right, moving on. This looks like the cadmium, nope, not the cadmium red, the let me turn my box over here, the Pyrrol red, I think. Yeah, this is Pyrrol red, like your fire engine red, super, super warm, intense red. And then next to it is our magenta. This did not look like magenta when it was dry. It looked more like an orangey color. I thought it was going to be like the transparent brown oxide, but they wouldn't do that. That's your Quinacridone magenta. Again, beautifully intense. This must be the Pyrrol orange. Gorgeous orange color. So far, so good. All right, moving on into our blues. My brush is barely damp, And I just rubbed the top of this a little bit, and look at that. Look at that intense color that's coming off. If you are worried about these cake pans being less intense than their tube counterparts, you do not have to worry. I can say that with pretty good confidence with how far we've gotten through these already. I barely touched them with water. This must be Ultramarine. Ultramarine took like 2 or 3 extra swipes, which it always does, even in my tube paints. I think it's just a harder mineral. I don't know. I might be making that up. To reactivate. This is my... All right, this is the test for me. So this is going to be sap green, and I love sap green so much, and I love the intensity and the vibrancy of it in the tubes. And yep, it is not disappointing. Not disappointing at all. Look at that, beautiful. And now we're getting into our neutrals. So this must be the transparent brown oxide. Very warm, bright brown color. Almost bordering on another orange, I would say. Like a deep, deep orange color. Which, that's all orange is like a lighter brown. Or brown is a neutralized orange. Burnt umber. And then our final one will be Payne's Gray. Which we all love our Payne's Gray. My brush wasn't even, oh, you can see a little splotch. That's right, we're gonna have to incorporate it into whatever we paint on that page. So Payne's Gray, oh, super dark, it's great. You can go all the way to almost black here. I'm going to lift just a little color out of it on the one side just so I can see that it is in fact gray. And as it dries, it'll lighten a little bit. All right, so that is our core, mini core palette. I am going to do a painting with this because I have so much to work with here. I have so many amazing colors to work with. This is all I need. And honestly, the majority of these colors are my go-to colors in this palette. I was going to do a compare from these to these kind of side by side. I can tell you I don't need to. These are super intense, super bright. They are just as high quality as what came out of the tube. So with full confidence, I can say I love these already. And this will be great if I'm traveling on the go. Like I do have a travel setup where I bring this whole thing with me, but if I need something smaller that I can just stick in my purse or my backpack, like this will be amazing. So I highly recommend. There's a link in the description if you want to check it out, or check out the other core mini palettes. Again, those have 6. So they have one side filled and then they have a bunch of blanks. So if you have some other tube paints that you really like, you can fill in with your tube paints. But let's paint something now. All right. Thanks for joining me for this little intro to our core minis, but let's see what they can do in a full-fledged painting of some kind. All right, here we go. So I did not have anything planned for this morning. I was just really excited to share this mini palette with you. So we're just going to keep it simple. I'm going to mask out. I also got these adorable little masking tapes in the mail. These guys, full of rainbow colors. For like $5. I think that's what got me. I didn't read the description. I didn't realize they were so tiny. I knew the width of the tape was 1/4 inch, but I didn't realize the rolls were tiny. But they're super adorable. So another impulse buy. How many of you out here have that problem? I'm usually pretty good. And I refrain from just putting random stuff that's suggested to me in my cart. But this was an exception. I got a few things. I'm so glad I did. I am so glad I impulse bought this little palette here and these little tape rolls. They will be well loved. Okay, so I have my core mini palette. I have my Bauhunk sketchbook 6x9. I have my Princeton Velvet Touch brushes I think I'm going to use exclusively today. I have a 6, an 8, or no, a 4, a 6, and a 10 right now. Just what I have on hand. I got some paper towels, and yeah, I'm good to go. So like I said, I didn't make a plan, so let's just get started and paint something loose and fun, and see how these paints do. I'm gonna do just a loose floral something or other. It'd probably be similar to something I've done before on like day 40, something like that. But let's just do like a loose vignette of a background, and then we'll put some loose flowers kind of coming up into it. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so for my colors, you know what, let's do something a little different maybe. I'm trying to decide yellow. I'm picturing in my head. Let's do this Nickel Azo Yellow. So this is the little silicone palette in the middle here. It's supposed to be non-staining, so these colors won't stain it. All right, it does beat up quite a bit, where, let's see, over here, they both beat up quite a bit. So I don't love that, but I can certainly live with it. It's a little easier on my other enameled palette, and it will probably improve over time. So I'm just gonna wet. We're gonna do wet on wet. Wet on wet. I'm gonna do this whole page in water, so I'm just kind of dumping water on here just to get the whole thing wet. If you have a mop brush or something even bigger, that would be great if you're working at this size. If you're working smaller, this brush size will probably do. So I'm using a size 10. And I was going to do, I'm going to do a yellow and green background. All right, so we're going to start with this Nickel Azo Yellow. So we're going to start with this at the top, kind of in like a circular-ish pattern, vignetted. And because everything is wet, I'm not going to add too much more water. I'm just going to use my brush to kind of help push things along. So super bright up top. I'm going to have to cover up that mistake that I made earlier. And then let's take some sap green and actually phthalo blue. So I'm making this kind of cooler green color. I'm going to do this down below. And I'm staying loose and free and fun. So I know I'm going to do some flowers kind of coming up in here. So I'm just using this green to kind of fill in the whole bottom, and then I'm taking the tip of my brush and just doing some upward strokes. Go all the way up top. All right, let's take some more phthalo blue. I'm going to do that right down at the bottom. So you can see I'm moving really quickly and using lots of gestures with my brush, like big swoops, and trying not to be too precise. And that's adding some layers of, using these different colors is adding a little dimension. So it gets lighter kind of as we go back further. Really clean my brush off. And while this is still wet, oh, bumped it with my hat. While this is still wet, I am going to add a few flowers kind of into this area, but I want them to disperse and I want them to be light and airy. So let's go with some of my magenta. No, that's this one. What is tougher, I think, with these cake pans as we use them is to remember which colors are which. These darker colors look very similar. Once you use something a few times, it gets easier to remember. So I'm actually going to switch brushes to a smaller brush, so I'm not dumping as much paint. And I'm going to do a few like kind of stalk-like flowers, just dabbing, boop, 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 like that. So I'm just doing these little dabs. This one I want it to be thinner at the top. I'm going to scooch this in, and as these dry they're going to become much lighter, and as we add layers they're going to be a lot less noticeable, so don't fret too much about details. We want them to be really light and kind of like in the background. Put something down here. And I'm going to change the heights on some of them, so these are even like further away and lighter in color, these lower down ones. Alright, so let's let that dry, and then we'll come back and put on some brighter flowers that don't dissipate with the wet on wet and are a little bit more structured. Okay, let it dry and we'll come back. All right, we're back. Things are nice and dry, pretty dry. A little damp up here, but nothing to worry myself about. All right, so I'm trying to decide if I'm going to stick with pinks and yellows and maybe purples, or if I should add anything blue in there. I think I'm going to keep the blues and greens to the grass and the leaves. We'll add some leaves in. So let's do some more of these, but more structured. Let's get some more magenta out. And this is going to be similar to, I think we did them like 2 or 3 videos ago. So what you can do with these, you can do kind of a wet on wet simulation. And we're going to try to ignore what's in the background. And what I'm going to do, because it's hard to see while I'm painting it because I'm using water, but I'll show you. So we're going to make, the stalk is going to be left out, but I'm going to put in little puddles of water that are like these buds, and I'm going to then drop color in to the very center where they touch the stem here, okay? And then we're going to let that dissipate and bleed out this way. I hope that was helpful. It's probably not helpful at all. But just to show you where I'm putting these blobs of water. So I'm going to start by just imagining, like up here, there's going to be a bud. And then I'm imagining like a big stalk down the center. Some of my buds and blooms will go over top. I'll do another one at the top here. And it's easy for me to see. I can see the shininess, but on camera it might be a little difficult because you're not looking from an angle at all. So just trust me right now while I put these in, and then I'm putting them closer together towards the bottom of the stalk so it's hardier. All right, so now when I pick up my magenta, I'm gonna drop it in at the base, and you can see it flows. You can see down here they were thicker. And then you can take your brush and you can kind of wiggle stuff around to get it to move around more, or push it back and be less. This is nice and loose and free. And then we're going to, sorry, I keep switching brushes and I don't tell you. I'm just bopping back and forth between my 6 and my 4. The 4 having a little bit more control for fine lines. I'm going to put in a stem. And you can wait for things to dry a little bit more if you want to, but it's going to run right up the middle. I'm going to let it touch some of these blooms, and I am going to connect everything. So this one is off, so I'm going to give it a little connector shoot there. See that? And then you can add in like little tiny leaves too. Oh, that's the wrong color. So if I want to add in little stalks of leaves, and you can see that stuff that we did initially in the background really is going to fade into the background, but it creates some depth to the eye so that everything isn't just flat in front of us. All right, so do we stick with pink, magenta, or do we add in some other colors? It's a really nice palette right now with the green and magenta. They are opposite each other on the color wheel, so they create a really great balance. All right, I'm going to throw in some purple, but I'm not going to use the Dioxazine purple. I'm actually going to use Ultramarine with my magenta. So I'm going to take it and kind of keep it in the magenta family. It's going to be a pinky purple, so that way we're not going really far off grid here. So I'm doing the same thing, making a nice robust kind of clumping towards the bottom, and then as I get towards the top, spreading them out a little bit more. And just imagining this center stalk that they're going to follow. And that they should either be close to, touching, or overlapping that stalk. You don't want one like way out here that you're going to then attach. All right, so let's use this more purpley color. So I mixed ultramarine with the magenta, having a higher concentration of the magenta. So again, same family, but a little bit of variation. A little bit more richness. And core, so what I love about core, one of my favorite things, is that it is very, the binder they use, Aquazol, I believe it's called, Aquazol, whatever it is they use in their formula and their binder, these colors, wet on wet, they move. They love to move and travel. And I find that fascinating and really energetic and exciting for the way that I paint. Now, some people may paint really controlled things that they don't want that much movement in wet on wet. They want a little, or it's just a little too out of control for them. That's fine. Everybody has their preference. Just because I paint with core does not mean you need to. Although I love it and I will extol what I believe are its virtues, but that doesn't mean it's the only and best paint out there, end all be all for everyone. So just keep that in mind. Paint with what you have, understand how it works. Oh, this is fun. Okay, so let's do one more before this video is super, super long. So I'm going to use that same color, I think, that same purpley color, just to keep things consistent. I'm going to do one more over here. I'm going to make it a little bit shorter, and I think maybe I'll play up more leaves in here just to make it a little more balanced. Kind of let it go off to the side a little bit. We'll bring the blooms down a little bit further. So I'm just trying to create not like perfect, like 1, 2, 3 all the way across, a little more organic offness, if that's a word. All right, that's green. Again, I'm like, okay, which one's magenta? They're all dark. And this is ultramarine to create our duskier purple, purpley pink. This one I feel like I have to add a little more water to the bottom here. To a few places, a little more bloomage. There we go. I do like putting a little gap towards the top where you'll be able to see the stem through. You do want to leave a little gap every so often so that when you do go to put in your stem, you have some place to put it that people can see it. But you also want things to cover up your stem. You don't want it to be, so this whole section here, my stem would go right through it. You wouldn't see it. It'd be covered up. So we're just going to that looks great. And I love the lightness here and how it gets darker and moodier down here. It really translates light, like this glowing kind of light from the background. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to create, so I just added ultramarine and sap green, which create this beautiful dark olivey color, dusky kind of dark green. And I'm just gonna add a bunch more leaves down here. You can change up your leaf shapes. We could have kind of these really wide petal leaves as well as those thinner ones. I'm just using the whole side of my brush to do those. These silicone wells have gotten much better after the initial use, so I'm sure it was just some kind of coating, or so they don't beat up as much as you can see there in those. All right, let's do some let me add a lot of water to this. I'm going to do some lighter leaves. And I probably should have added a few leaf-like shapes when I did the original layer, because these leaves don't really, even though they're lighter, they're not as diffused as much as the flowers themselves, so they might feel a little separate. So I probably should have done those ahead of time, but I'm going to add some in now. Just some lighter ones that look like they're more in the background. And I still have pink stuff drying here and there. So, all right, that feels good to me. I could keep going forever and ever. Adding lots more just little details. You can add this is phthalo blue and sap green, so you can see the difference between mixing phthalo blue, a cool shade, with sap green, and the Ultramarine, a warm blue shade with the sap green. So it's still drying. There's still little puddles in here, but I'm going to take my tape off just so we can see those clean edges. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video and this introduction to this fantastic little core mini palette. So if you were debating whether to get core or not, and you just weren't sure where to start and you didn't want to buy your own whole 24 paint palette, these core minis are a great place to start. Kind of all in one. It has everything you need here. Really, I'm a real big fan of this palette. This is a great starter palette. For anyone just starting out and you're overwhelmed by color choices. There we go, our nice clean edges. You still see some of this blue tape from the page behind it, but there is our fun little loose wildflower painting. So don't forget to check out the descriptions for links to this core mini palette and all the other supplies and materials that I use on a regular basis, as well as feel free to leave a comment. If you have a question about supplies and materials, or you just want to leave a comment on this general video, share with a friend, like, subscribe to the channel. If you are new here, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to paint with you, and hopefully you'll join us for another watercolor journal day. All right, y'all, take care. Happy painting, and I'll see you for our next watercolor journal page very soon.